Okay, so you've got an everyday citizen, works at a factory, works at an office, just an everyday person. Uh, how might they prepare? How might they prepare ahead or live their lives in such a way as to prepare for this sort of a thing? Because whether it's in their city or not, it will affect them. Or what kind of posture? How do they need to prepare in the world we're in, looking forward to this event?
That's a tough one. And the reason I say that is because the average citizen is oblivious to this.
Yeah,
So the only way, again, I'm not going to say it falls to the government, but and you don't want to make your citizens feel weird either, right? So there's this this part where if I'm in New Orleans, like New Orleans right now, those businesses are probably more aware of how they would do it over again if they could, right? That was a vehicle attack, by the way. So they have a tendency to change things up. So
hmm,
because if they do one thing over and over again, you start getting used to it and you get
sure,
better at it. It's the usual thing. I think they have to be aware that that's a possibility in the first place. New Yorkers, if you go to New York, they're aware that there could be a terrorist attack there. They're in New York. It's a primary hub. If you go to, Knoxville, Tennessee, they may not be as in tune with that. So I think the first thing is for them to be aware of that in the first place. And if they're not, then that's an issue, right? And then what would that attack look like? And what can they do based on the attack? If somebody runs into the building and starts shooting the place up like Mumbai, well, we already have a protocol for that, and that was for schools, right? It was
right.
lock and place. It was, hide, fight, or run, right? There's your three choices right there. Bombs in general are very difficult to deal
Right.
with. Point blank. You got to get away, isolate, call EOD, let them deal with it if you can identify it in the first place. So it's really a tough thing to say, well, how do you prepare for that? Well, I mean, the obvious thing is if you have a lot more concealed carrying holders in that area and the guy's an active shooter, the chances of him being neutralized quicker it's a matter of how many can you save, not how many you're going to lose,
Right.
right? Um, then the chances of him getting shot by somebody with a CCW pretty high, right?
Yeah. Welcome
Um,
to Georgia, man.
yeah,
Lot of concealed carry here. I
you go
mean,
to
even in church,
Massachusetts, yeah,
even
you
in
go to
church.
Massachusetts, Boston,
Uh-huh.
probably not a lot of concealed carry there, but there's a lot of cops,
Yes.
and they dealt with the Tsarnaev brothers, whatever,
Yes.
up there
Hmm.
blowing up Boston Marathon. So
Right.
they're probably a little bit more prepared. Maybe they've gotten lax over the years. So if don't have an attack after a while, people are like, okay, that was it, we're done, and they kind of back off. But that's a tough question, and I think it's just a matter of, hey, be aware, and if something doesn't look right, call it in, because they have to show up, they have to scout the area out first, and if you can get ahead of that and get response started that way, you can minimize how much damage they can do,
Well, I'm
right?
going to go off script here. I was going to go a couple of different ways, but I'm going to go off script here because you've done such a good job of answering some of the even sort of follow-up questions. Let's say a person decides to take responsibility and use their Second Amendment rights. They get with some people. They actually get an adequate firearm for concealed carry or home. Uh, what would you say to them about what kind of training that they need to get? And, even from like beginning to intermediate to further on, what kind of training would you suggest these quote average citizens get for themselves?
Well, I would research who good instructors are, and by the way, good instructors are lesser than you think. There's a lot of instructors out there now. It's become an industry, and there's some folks that are very good, and there's a bunch. But I would research who the instructor is and see if that they're getting realistic training. Okay, I saw one guy doing some kind of gun kata situation, you knife in one hand, gun in the other. You're like, what the hell are you doing, right?
uh,
So it's kind of dumb, but so make sure you get somebody who's competent, first of all. Second of all, understand that um, it for training like this, a lot of people think that they go to a school for 2 days or 3 days and they've got some kind of inoculation and now they know how to shoot. They're ninjas. You're not.
right.
It's like any fighting skill, you have to keep it up. So go to a school, and then after you learn from that individual, go out and practice yourself. But by researching that person, make sure they're doing something that's realistic and relevant to what you're doing. So what I mean by that is when I'm teaching civilians like pistol stuff, I'm teaching them to be an individual person dealing with a problem. I actually advocate, if you can avoid shooting somebody or avoid getting into a shooting, avoid it, right?
Absolutely.
Based on what you're doing, obviously. Guy with an AK running around shooting people, that's kind of a no-brainer. You're interceding, then that makes sense, right? But if you can avoid it, avoid it. So
Yes.
you got to be careful about the rah guys who are like kill, kill, kill,
Right.
and working CQB when realistically you're going to be by yourself with your family.
Yes.
Having your family with you, that changes your tactics too, because I got to protect them and deal with the problem.
Right.
So I'm drawing fire. How do I draw fire away from them and neutralize, suspect without hitting anyone else? It's hard. And if you think about what you're doing, you've got to get the right instructor, get the good training baseline, and then go out and train yourself, understanding ahead of time that no matter how good you get, no matter how good Tom is, I know that under actual stress, my accuracy is going to drop off some. There's no
Everybody.
way around, right?
Yep.
It's stress. That's just the way life is. But the better off you are, the better your baseline is, the more effective you're going to be. So when I teach academy courses, IWI, we stress that. We stress accuracy, consistency, doing a lot of reps to try and get that neural pathway down. But then at the end of it, I'll always tell them, hey, you got to go out and practice because you're going to lose it all.
It is
goes
a
away
perishable skill.
very much. Just like learning, if I had to wrestle somebody right now, it probably would be pretty ugly because I haven't wrestled in a long time. When you do it all the time, great. My GT
It's a different thing.
good, but I don't do it a lot.
Got
So I know I've lost some.
One last question here, and you've kind of hit on it already. What can we do in our country as a whole? What is it citizens can get behind in general, conceptually, philosophically, to get on a better security footing throughout the country? What I call homeland areas, areas outside the beltways, if you will.
Outside the Beltway, meaning Washington?
Meaning like outside of Washington in New York and LA. What a lot of those folks call the flyover country.
So the reality is there's a couple of ways we could attack this. Obviously, we got to secure the border thing. I don't know why that's even a debate, securing a border. I don't get that. You don't let somebody into your house who you don't know who they are, right?
Yeah.
I think honestly, to a point, those that are here, we have obvious criminals that we need to get rid of. And inside of those elements are cells. So perfect example is Trindalagua, TDA. I don't know if you know this, or you probably do. I don't know. But believe it or not, that gang is more organized than anybody gives it credit for.
Oh, yeah.
And Maduro has control over that gang from Venezuela. The reason he doesn't want him back is that's a projection of what he wants to do.
It's forced projection for him.
It's a projection for him. It's a very cheap projection too, because they get money and they do things anyway. So they're self-sufficient.
Right.
And they establish their own little web of whatever, but he gets to use them and nobody's aware of that. Right. So getting rid of those threats, getting rid of threats that, hey, this guy came in, but we really don't know who he is. And we suspect that he is really bad dude.
Yeah.
Right. He's been to these countries that we kind of know of. Why just, why keep them there? We need to get rid of them. Right. And then I think going back and then our vetting process for bringing people in is ridiculous. It's stupid. It's the dumbest. How about we try and actually identify who these people are? Right. And then maybe develop a new list of these people are a high threat. Sorry,
right.
You're gone.
Yeah.
Right. So, and that's hard to do. It's for me to say that. On its face, there's a concept of it, and then there's the reality of it. For the average person, they're not going to have access to that information. They're not going to even know how to deal with that. I hate to say it, but there are certain mechanisms that only state, federal law, and I would actually push some of that responsibility back down to state and local, because they know their areas really well. I think our dependency on the federal government for all this stuff can be a mistake when you got people that live in an area where they kind of know how things have changed and the landscape of it and where people are.
Right.
I think we're missing out on that. There's a lot of local intelligence that can be drawn on. And the FBI, the DEA did a very good job of swearing in DEA agents, right, from local agencies because number one, they needed help.
Yeah.
But number two, those people knew the area.
Some of the most valuable DEA agents that I ever encountered in my time were people who had previously been street cops
Yeah.
doing that job that knew frontwards, backwards, and sideways what the deal was. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And they knew how to deal with people and they had good judgment because they'd had bad judgment at one point, right? So
Yeah.
that's all done. So the average Fed and you know, I can't speak for all of them. I can speak for some of them.
Sure.
You know, the U.S. Marshal Service has they arrest people all the time because they're going after, warrants and stuff like that, like guys who are on flight risks or they are dangerous fleeing felons.
Mhm.
So they're arresting people all the time. But you may have a guy who does an investigation for 2 years and he arrests 12 people.
Yeah.
That's it. That's his experience in putting handcuffs on people.
Right.
The average officer, one night, I might have 6 arrests in one night, 6 or 7 arrests in one night, where I'm having to deal with possibly fighting somebody in DT and being able to talk. That's a big thing, is communicating things down and dialing it down. And that kind of communication only comes from experience. And some of the best FBI agents I've met were cops.
Yeah, I understand. I did more. I've run into feds and even other law enforcement officers. When I worked in Houston, I got more experience and I did more and I encountered more in 6 months than some people would their entire career.
Yeah. And yeah, it's interesting. I could kind of tell, depending on the agent I was talking, it was very rare we interface with them at a local level, but we did. We interfaced with ATF and some of those other guys too. But you could tell the guys who were probably on the street at one time, and then there are other guys that, yeah, before this I was a CPA, and now I'm working for the FBI. Yeah, you are. Got it.